Rain hammered the courtyard stones, and the hooded figure lowered a sword that was still wet with her blood. A voice leaned close to her ear in the dark. The second prince died because of you, because he was engaged to you. Then came the words that mattered most, delivered politely, like a message from an employer. Your family will be joining you soon. And that is how Erin Reithers, the woman the Empire called its greatest villainess, was murdered in the rain at 21. The night sky closed over her and took the last of the light. To understand that rain, you have to go back a very long way. Chandeliers, roses, a hall full of silk and laughter. The finest houses in the Empire had gathered to dance and to gossip. A blonde noblewoman stopped in the middle of a sentence, and her expression froze into something cold and extremely interested. Down the marble stair came a girl in brown, holding her skirt with the care of somebody who had rehearsed the movement for years. Green eyes, brown hair, a face every drawing room in the capital had discussed. Erin Reithers had come to the ball after all. The whispering started before she reached the floor. Did you hear? Her maids run away from that house in the middle of the night. She kept her chin level and let every word land on her, because flinching would have cost more than listening did. It was the second prince they pitied, of course. Blackmailed into an engagement with a woman like that. Poor man, they said, and drank. Her gloved hand closed slowly around the trim of her belt, tightened until the leather creased, and stayed exactly where it was. Erin Reithers, eldest daughter of a marquisate, known throughout the Empire as a creature of corruption, cruelty, and expensive appetite. But every single story the capital told about her had been written by somebody else, and she had never once been given a chance to answer it. Lightning caught the window of a dark room at the estate, and the woman standing in it holding a thin cane in one hand. Sweat ran down the girl's cheek and dripped off her jaw. Her eyes never once left the woman in front of her. The cane came down, then it came down again. The sound was very small in a house that size, and nobody ever came. Erin knelt on the polished floor with her head bowed, because standing upright had not been permitted in this room for years. You really are a useless child, her stepmother said, and those words stayed in her body far longer than the bruises ever did. And what exactly do you imagine your father would do? The woman asked pleasantly, if he ever found out what you truly are. She was hauled up off the tiles by her hair, weightless for one strange moment, arms flung wide like a doll thrown across a room. Blood soaked through her collar and down her shoulder. She had been 11 years old the first time this happened to her. A young lady, the woman recited from above her, maintains proper posture and a lofty expression no matter what the situation is. How do you do that? Erin asked her once, reaching up for a sleeve she had never been allowed to touch. She went down onto the floor again. There was always a reason for it, and the reason was always something wrong with her. So she learned the lesson properly. She built the cold, proud, unreachable face that the whole empire would later call arrogance. That's right, her stepmother murmured, finally pleased with something the girl had managed to do correctly. A hand caught her wrist in the dark and did not let go, and the grip was almost gentle, which was somehow worse. Such a stupid, pathetic little thing, she said, and the smile that came afterward was almost affectionate. Nobody outside those walls ever saw a second of it. Keeping it inside those walls had been the entire point from the beginning. The abuse had run since her childhood, quiet and constant and perfectly deniable, like rain coming through a cracked roof. Young Lady Erin, the old steward said one afternoon, catching her hand before she could pull the sleeve back down over it. You must tell the Marquis what the madam is doing to you. Please, my lady, tell him the next time he comes home. She never did tell him, and later, when the house came apart, it was that same old man's voice screaming at her to run. My lady, get away from here, he shouted, one arm out. That was the last thing anybody ever said to her kindly. Have you eaten? The second prince asked her at a banquet once, leaning down. You haven't touched anything on your plate. He cut a slice of cake himself and set the plate down in front of her without being asked, and without making a performance of it. He had been forced into the engagement and must have hated every hour of it. He was unfailingly kind to her anyway. Right up to the very end, even her fiancé, especially her fiancé, which was exactly what made it unbearable afterward. They tied him to a chair in a cellar, and a gloved hand came to rest on his pale hair almost like a blessing. That one was your fault as well, the voice told her, while black thorns closed slowly around what was left of him. They died because they made the mistake of standing beside you, truly useless, right to the very last person. She knelt in the rain with everyone she had ever loved already gone, and absolutely nothing left in her hands to hold on to. The blade went in below her ribs and came out again. She heard it happen more clearly than she felt it. Then the assassin crouched down beside her, polite as a household servant. "The madam asked me to tell you this, my lady." Purple hair spilled out across the wet ground, and the whole world narrowed down to a single point of failing light. She lay there in her own blood with one hand still reaching toward somebody who was not there and never would be. Car horns, glass towers. A hard blue sky over a city that had never once heard the word marquis spoken out loud. Crowds poured across a crosswalk in the morning glare, thousands of them, and not a single person knew her name. "1 glass, please," said a man in a cap at the counter. "Yes, sir," answered the girl in the apron behind it. Cups stacked in a sink, machines humming, the small ordinary noise of a life with almost nothing inside it. "Guest number 325, 1 glass." She looked up at the ceiling, and for 1 second she was somewhere else entirely. Because that rain had not been the end of her life. It had only been the end of the first attempt at it. She had carried every last memory of Aaron Reethers into a body born 800 years and one entire world away from that courtyard. Reborn in modern Korea, handed a second life with no monsters and no marquees and nothing at all to do with it. Her parents there found her a nuisance and mostly left her alone in the apartment. She returned the favor without complaint. And then that life ended as well, quietly, unremarkably, and the wheel she never asked about turned one more time. A third life. A third body, kneeling on cold stone under a strange violet light she did not recognize. This time she was born into a knightly house, and this time, for the first time in any life, she was born with talent. A genius swordswoman, the instructors called her, before she was even old enough to hold a training blade properly. She lived that entire life through to the end as a swordmaster, one of the very few the world had produced in a century. And she died again and woke again, and understood absolutely nothing about why any of it kept happening to her. She never learned the rule behind it. She only learned that the rule had no interest whatsoever in what she wanted. However she died, she came back with every past life intact inside her, down to the last minute of every single one. This time was different, though. This time she opened her eyes, standing upright in the middle of an active monster hunt. "Damn it, why are they suddenly coming this deep into the tree line?" a knight gasped, with blood in his teeth. Someone in a gray cloak walked out of the tree line toward all the screaming, and did not appear to be in any hurry. "It's too late," a wounded knight shouted at her. He had no idea that the girl walking past him had already died 3 separate times. Behind him, a bear the size of a loaded wagon came apart in midair under a single stroke of blue light. She held the sword the way only 20 years of daily repetition can teach a human body to hold one. What the knight saw was a marquise's daughter who had never trained a day, cutting a high-tier beast in half. One of them looked at the corpse, then at the blood sprayed up the rock face, then very slowly back at her. "Lady Erin," somebody breathed behind her, and the name landed on her back like a bucket of cold water. She did not answer him. She turned, found the next one moving in the dark, and finished it without breaking stride. "There are stragglers left in the eastern trees," she said flatly. "Go and help the other knights, all of you." Under a sky full of stars, she stood alone, wearing a body she had already worn once and already lost once. Stupid, unable to protect anyone, beaten by her stepmother for a decade, murdered before her 22nd birthday. That was the girl the Empire remembered burying, and that girl was gone now, permanently, without ceremony. What had come back was wearing her face and carrying the complete combat memory of a dead swordmaster. She still had no idea why the world had chosen to return her to Aaron Reethers, of all the people it could have picked. The wind moved her hair across her face. Somewhere behind the trees, something enormous was still breathing steadily. It came through the dark, fast, snapping branches, starving and absolutely certain about where its next meal was standing. She stepped off the ridge into open air with the sword already reversed, and the bear looked up far too late. But never again, she thought as she fell through the dark toward it. Never that life again, whatever it costs. The blade went into the hilt, and the violet crest set into the pommel flared white against the blood. She dropped through the dark with blood across her uniform and no expression at all on her face. The question was never whether she could survive this life. The question was who had paid for her death in the last one. And whoever that person was, They did not yet know that she remembered every single second of it. Atenzi Academy stood white and enormous under a clean spring sky, its clock tower older than most of the kingdoms around it. The only academy in the empire, where students hammered at enchanted dummies in a courtyard lit green from underneath. Gifted commoners studied here beside old nobility, alongside foreign royals and the imperial princes themselves. It was less a school than a careful collection of every person who would one day matter to the continent. Gardens, fountains, and gravel walks, all laid out to be admired by people who had not yet invented the photograph. And into the middle of all that rolled a crimson carriage far too extravagant for the first morning of term. A servant bowed low at the carriage step. The young woman who came down it did not look at him once. "Aaron Reethers has arrived," the footman announced. Not one person in that courtyard knew they were looking at a woman who had already been buried once. She stood in the flowering light and looked up at a building she had last seen from the far side of her own funeral. Seeing it like this, she thought, it finally sinks in properly. A few days ago, I came back to the past. It had begun in a forest, under a hanging carcass, with 4 exhausted strangers staring at her like she was the monster. At first, she had not understood whose body she had returned into. Then somebody behind her had called out. "If you're frightened, please hide behind me," the girl said, arms spread wide. "I'll protect you, my lady. Sarah." That had been Sarah's voice unmistakably, and Sarah had been dead for 2 full years. And she had said Lady Aaron, not Lady Reethers the way strangers did, Lady Aaron the way only her own household did. From the uniforms, the season, and a lifetime of unwanted practice at being reincarnated, she assembled the rest of it. Something extraordinary had happened to her again, and this time the extraordinary thing came with a date attached to it. She was 20 years old, and it was the spring before absolutely everything in her life started going wrong. So she stood in the academy courtyard, straightened her back, and let the whispering begin exactly on schedule. "Look at that thing. That carriage is genuinely absurd. Who arrives at a school in something like that? And look at the dress. I heard she transferred into swordsmanship purely to chase the second prince around." She heard every word of it. She had heard every word of it once before, standing in this exact spot. "My lady," Sarah whispered beside her, twisting a handful of her own skirt into a knot. "Are you truly sure you'll be all right?" People had disliked Aaron for years. This particular year, they hated her. Because she was engaged to Ferdin, second prince of the Lexia Empire, and not one soul believed it had been his idea. It had not been her idea either. That detail had never once managed to become part of anybody's version of the story. They said she threatened to die unless she got him. They said she transferred departments purely to stay near him. What did the students of this academy ever do to deserve having her here? One of them sighed loudly. "The real victim is Lady Asalee," said another. "Her lover, taken from her by the worst woman in the empire. One hand had closed gently around another hand in a garden once, and the entire school had heard about it by evening. A woman who trampled a knight's honor, broke a devoted couple apart, and seized the title of the prince's fiancé. Naturally, they hated her for it. Standing where they stood, she thought she would have hated that woman too. "Sarah, don't worry about me, just go back to the Marquise's estate. Will you truly be all right on your own, my lady?" Small fingers closed around hers and held on considerably longer than a servant's fingers are supposed to. "I'll be fine," Aaron said, and smiled, and it was the first entirely honest smile she had managed in 2 lifetimes. Behind them, a young man in black stopped on the path to look down at a girl who had fallen in the gravel. Every rumor the Empire knew about Aaron Reethers had been manufactured, carefully and patiently, by her own stepmother. She had no intention whatsoever of telling anybody the truth about it, not one word, not to a single person. Because she remembered in detail exactly what had happened the last time she opened her mouth about that house. A servant face down on the floor. A hand clamped over a screaming mouth, blood soaking into expensive wallpaper. Speaking up had always cost other people their lives, and never once cost her anything at all. So this time she would carry all of it alone, and nobody would be standing close enough to her to die of it. Up in her room, she stopped in front of the mirror, half out of her traveling clothes, and stared at herself. The academy uniform. It had been a very long time indeed since she last had a reason to wear one of these. She lifted her sleeve and turned her forearm slowly toward the light coming in through the window. Bandages, wrapped in careful layers so that none of the ends would show underneath the cuff of the jacket. She examined them the way you examine somebody else's injury, with detached and mildly professional interest. Somewhere behind her, memory put a figure at the window with a thin cane hanging from one hand, and a girl kneeling on violet tile with her forehead almost touching the floor, waiting for permission to move. Her stepmother had beaten her right up until the hour the carriage left for the academy gates. The dull ache everywhere under the uniform was the proof and the personal signature of Corellia Reathers. And that was the part she could never make fit. Why bother beating a girl every night when you already intend to have her killed? Your family will be joining you soon. A promise delivered by a professional on somebody else's explicit order. A figure in a dark cloak, standing under a sky that had not yet started raining on anyone. Those last words had bothered her for an entire lifetime, and she was finally in a position to go and ask about them. House Reathers had supplied Imperial Knights for 11 generations, which was exactly the reason somebody had decided to erase it. Her younger brother Karen trained every single day to carry that name forward once their father stepped down. And that house, in the months before her death, had been driven right to the edge of complete annihilation. All of it because of one person. One woman standing behind dark roses in a locked room, smiling to herself. She had not understood any of it at 20. She understood it now, and the answer frightened her badly. A marquise's second wife could not erase a house like this on her own. Somebody powerful had been standing behind her. So who was it? Erin said aloud to an empty bedroom. Who exactly was holding your leash, madam? A knock at the door cut the thought in half. Somebody had come to see her on this day once before, too. Ah, she thought, with the specific dread of a woman who already knows precisely how a conversation is going to end. Karen Reathers, Erin's blood brother, 17 years old and permanently, exhaustingly furious with her. "Are you out of your mind?" he shouted, crossing the room before the door had even finished swinging open. "You can barely walk as far as a carriage. How exactly do you intend to survive combat training with that body?" Same temper as always, she thought, and walked calmly past him toward the window without answering. They had argued like this the first time around as well, in this room, on this day, about this exact subject. "Did you really have to transfer into the swordsmanship department?" he demanded. "Of all the departments in this academy?" She watched the courtyard below and said nothing at all, which had never once calmed him down in 17 years. "Everyone in this school already despises you," he said, and his voice cracked open on the word everyone. "And you had to go and make it worse on purpose. Just tell me why. Tell me why once and I'll go." He caught her wrist at the door. "Everyone in this academy hates you already. Do you really have to make it worse?" And she could not even argue with him because Karen had every right in the world to be angry about it. He was a swordsmanship student himself, dreaming of knighthood, and her name on that roster insulted all of it. "You," he had shouted at her once before, in almost the same doorway, in almost exactly the same broken voice. She had cried then, ashamed of herself, apologizing for existing at all. That had never once helped either of them. Now she simply stood there while he held her hand and shook with a fury he had never been able to name. Then he let go of her, stepped back, and gave her the small, contemptuous smile he had learned somewhere in this house. Nuna, a boy with green eyes, had once shouted, running the length of a corridor just to reach her a few seconds sooner. He used to hug her hard enough to knock the breath out of both of them and then laugh about it for an hour. They had been genuinely close when they were small. That was the part that still did damage years later. "You used to follow me absolutely everywhere," she said quietly, and watched every muscle in his face flinch. "I don't know what you're planning," he said, "but you will never get anywhere near the second prince. He's in the advanced class. You are in the beginner class. The two don't even share a corridor, let alone a room. Today only, because of the swordsmanship evaluation. After today, you won't see him again all term. So give it up and go back to your own department, before you humiliate this family any further than you have." Then his eyes dropped to the bandage wrapped around her hand, and everything in his face changed at once. He crossed the room in 2 strides and took her fingers as carefully as if they might come apart in his grip. "Why didn't you?" he began, and then discovered he could not physically finish the sentence. "Say that you were injured," he managed at last. She looked back at him and said absolutely nothing. She reached past his shoulder and unlatched the door with the flat end of a wooden training rod. "If you're finished talking, could you please leave?" There was no temperature at all in her voice. "I have class," she said, and walked out on her only brother without looking back at him once. He stood alone in the empty room for a long time with one hand still raised halfway toward the door. The swordsmanship department of Atenzi Academy, white towers standing over a field of clipped green grass. People called this place the Empire's last stronghold, and the people who called it that were not being poetic. It existed to raise knights for a front line that had lost ground every single year for the last 2 decades. Demonic beasts were multiplying somewhere out beyond the border, and somebody had to stand where they came through. The advanced class here did not simply train. They received live subjugation orders and rode out into the field. She stopped in the corridor outside, closed her eyes, and pressed one hand flat against her own chest. Ferdin had gone out on expedition under the Emperor's direct orders, in the version of this year she remembered. A dining hall, warm lamps, uniforms, and a shape at the edge of memory she could not look at directly yet. She sat down among students who quietly moved their chairs a few inches further away from hers. She really came. Impressive, in more ways than one. Can she even hold a sword with that arm of hers? And he never came home, said the memory, in a voice like water running slowly under a locked door. Ferdin rode out on the Emperor's orders that autumn, and by winter the Empire had buried an empty coffin for him. But then, she thought, and could not quite make herself finish the shape of the hope. Have you eaten? I noticed you haven't touched the food. A slice of cake with a single strawberry on top of it. A blond young man in dress uniform, medals catching the lamplight, looking down at her untouched plate. He had cut it himself that evening, and she had been far too frightened of him to say thank you properly. Violet eyes. A face she had carried through 2 separate deaths and 1 entirely different world. He was standing at the far end of the hall in the light from the tall windows, talking to somebody else. He's alive, she thought, and something that had been locked shut under her ribs for years came loose all at once. Elsewhere, in a much quieter room, a hand came down on the second prince's shoulder from behind. No matter how many times I turn it over, the blue-haired man said, none of this adds up at all. The Marquis of Reathers's demand is absurd. It's absurd, Ferdin. Say the word with me, out loud. Derek Athern, the prince's closest aide, and the only man in the Empire permitted to speak to him like that. House Reathers was one of the 5 great houses holding the forward line of the monster defense. The Marquis himself had never quite reached Swordmaster, and had never once stopped trying to get there. His 3 decades on that front line deserved every single honor the crown had ever handed him. Which was precisely why his behavior over the last 2 years made so little sense to anybody at court. He had spent an enormous amount of prestige forcing his daughter into the swordsmanship department. And then spent whatever was left of it forcing an engagement with the Empire's second prince. Meanwhile, the man engaged to the so-called Villainess sat reading by a window, entirely unbothered by any of it. Ferdin, this is genuinely ridiculous, Derek said, crossing the room to stand directly in his light. The Marquis's wife knelt in that throne room, weeping into her hands. Please, save our daughter. Erin says she will die if she isn't engaged to the prince. Erin threatened her own stepmother, apparently. She doesn't love you, she wants the title, and she will be an obstacle standing in your path forever. Ferdin turned a page without reading it. Something in his jaw moved once and then went completely still. Ferdin, I don't want to watch her die either. That is the only reason I'm saying any of this to you. No matter how gifted you are, Derek continued, considerably more carefully than he had started. As long as His Majesty openly favors the first prince, that throne may never come to you at all. You need real strength, Derek said, and neither man knew that the strength Ferdin needed was standing at the bottom of the stairs. More than you have right now. And you need it this year, Ferdin, not in another 10 of them. What we need is a knight who can be useful immediately. Karen's talent is real, but Karen is still a boy. The strongest swordmaster in the Empire is Duke Assalee, and Duke Assalee happens to have a daughter. So once again, Derek said carefully, the Lady of Assalee would solve every single problem you currently have. I am speaking to you, he snapped. Are you going to keep doing something else while I talk at you? What on earth are you? He started, and then followed the direction of the prince's gaze across the hall. A small figure in white had stopped at the foot of the staircase and was looking straight back at them. Ferdin set the book down on the table without bothering to mark the page he had been on. Derek, he said, and his aide's mouth closed for the first time in 10 uninterrupted minutes. He put one hand flat on the tabletop and said it very simply. I don't believe in rumors. He had heard every story ever told about Aaron Reathers. He had simply never agreed to accept any of them. She came down the stairs into the white light, and the entire hall pretended very hard not to watch her. She stopped in front of a window full of sunset with her hands folded and her spine absolutely straight. He crossed the floor toward her through the roses and the noise and all of the staring. He said, and let the single word sit there in the air between them for a moment. Only believe what I see with my own eyes. And you, Lady Erin, are somebody I have never actually looked at. It's been a while. This is our first meeting since the engagement was formally announced, isn't it? She stood looking up at a dead man, alive and smiling 3 steps away, and forgot every word she had ever known. It's been a while, he repeated gently. The first time we've met since the engagement was announced. Light through the tall windows caught the dust in the air and made the whole room look like a memory of itself. Her heart was in complete disorder, and not one single part of that showed anywhere on her face. 3 lifetimes. 3 deaths, and the one person she had never once managed to leave behind in any of them. He stood there breathing, unhurt, 20 years old, with no idea whatsoever that he was already scheduled to die. What should I say to him, she thought. Am I even permitted to speak to this man at all? Then the whisper from the last life found her again, right there in the daylight. He died because of you. He died because he stood beside you. 2 glowing hands pointing down at her out of the dark. She looked at the hand he was offering her, and very deliberately did not take hold of it. Boots on stone. The corridor outside filled up with uniforms, all heading for the training ground. Carved doors swung open onto the morning light and the smell of oiled leather and cut grass. Students gathered underneath a great domed roof, ringed by stone columns and racks of practice weapons. Welcome to the training grounds for the swordsmanship evaluation, a voice called out across the sand. My name is Edward Fullen, and I am the swordsmanship instructor assigned to the beginner class. This is the only day beginners will see the advanced class fight, so I suggest you all watch closely. A swordsmanship evaluation, Erin thought, looking at the sand. I have stood in this exact spot before. A girl in the memory swung a training sword badly and nearly took her own knee off with the follow-through. You can't even lift it. Somebody had laughed at her that day. It's far too heavy for you, little lady. She had been pathetic, and she admitted that freely. She had also never had any other option available. Because she had wanted the sword since she was a child. Wanted it with her entire chest, for no reason she could explain. She used to watch her brother's lessons from behind a gilded door, silently counting his forms. Peeking again? Her stepmother's voice, always. A lady does not learn something like swordsmanship, ever. So transferring here had been the happiest day of that life. The happiness had lasted about a week. Because of one particular person, and that person was standing in this room with her right now. 2 students in violet approached across the sand, and one of them was already smiling at her. Philip. The most persistent bully she had ever had in any life, and he had never once gotten bored of it. Don't you dare say my name, Erin Reithers. Red eyes, gray hair, and a mouth built entirely for sneering. Rules or no rules, I am royalty of the Edwin Kingdom, and you are a provincial noble from the border. He genuinely hated hearing his own name in her mouth. She filed that detail away carefully for later use. The first emperor, Lexia, had written one particular rule into this academy's foundation charter. Inside these walls, status does not apply, except to the imperial family. Anyone here may speak plainly to anyone. More importantly, Philip grinned at her. Shall I tell you exactly what is about to happen to you out there? How much humiliation a girl who can't even make knight cadet is going to eat in front of this whole yard. She looked up at him without blinking once. I'm not the least bit afraid of you, Philip. His smile came apart on his face. Nobody in his entire life had ever said his name back to him like that. That's enough explanation for one morning, the instructor announced from the top of the steps. Erin Reithers, come forward and show us your form. Yes, sir, she said. Watch and judge for yourselves. Somebody up in the gallery pulled the bell rope, and the yard went quiet in slow, uneven stages. She walked out onto the sand past 2 instructors who had already privately written her off entirely. A rack of practice blades stood by the wall. She chose the plainest one there and weighed it in her palm. Heavy. In this body, in this condition, her hands shook visibly just from holding the thing level. Look at her hands, somebody said, loudly enough to carry all the way across the training yard. Look at them shaking. My palms are going to blister again by evening, she thought, with the mild irritation of an old veteran. Then she set her feet properly, and the noise of the yard seemed to move one full step further away from her. Everyone alive carries mana. Hers was entirely ordinary, no larger than a merchant's or a farmer's. The difference was that she knew precisely how to move it because she had done it every day for 40 years. "What?" said the boy in the front row, leaning forward. The trembling. Her hands just stopped shaking. "How?" Philip said, and the word came out considerably smaller than he had intended it to. A very long time ago, her father had called both of his children into his study and shut the door. "There is a power in this family," he told them, "that has been handed down for 11 generations. Once every 2 generations, House Reathers produces a descendant carrying the qualities of a master. If I never reach it myself," he said, "then one of you two will be the one who carries it instead." In the end, her father never became a sword master. Neither, despite everything he sacrificed, did Karen. Which left exactly one person in that study who the sword could possibly have been waiting for. Me, she thought. And the answer had been standing in front of them the whole time, ignored, told to sit down. The training yard. The barrels, the green trees, the perfectly ordinary morning that was about to end. The blade moved once, and the target came apart at an angle nobody in that gallery could follow with their eyes. A shirtless upperclassman lowered his staff slowly and let out a very long, very careful breath. "Ah," said Aaron, looking at the wreckage of the equipment. "That may have been slightly too much." Elsewhere, several hours earlier, a door had been closed firmly in a young man's face. Karen stood alone in the corridor outside with his fist still raised and nowhere at all to put it. "Damn it," he said to the wall. "I was worried about her, and all she did was throw me out of the room. They say she met a pack of monsters on the road, so whose blood was actually on her sleeve when she arrived?" "The evaluation should be finished by now," he muttered, hacking at a straw target he had already killed twice. "Hey, did you hear the story about Aaron Reathers?" 2 students slowed down as they passed the fence. "I got it from an advanced student who watched the entire evaluation. Honestly, you won't believe it. Apparently Aaron Reathers," one of them began, and then a hand closed around the back of his collar. "Ka, Karen." Both of them dangled there, kicking, entirely off the ground and going nowhere. "That story," said Karen, smiling in a way that frightened both of them badly. "Let me in on it, too." "Everyone worked hard today," the instructor said, rolling up his notes. "Class ends here. Dismissed." Students poured out of the training hall under the banners, arguing loudly about what they had just watched. "Aaron Reathers!" somebody shouted behind her, and she turned around expecting a great deal more of the same. Instead, Philip bent at the waist and put his head down in front of the entire crowded courtyard. She stood there staring at the back of his neck with absolutely no idea what she was supposed to do with it. "Lift your head, everyone is staring at us." "No," he said. "I am not ashamed of bowing my head to you. What you showed in that yard today was more knightly than anything I have ever managed in my life. The one who behaved without honor here was me. I let a petty prejudice narrow my entire field of vision. I finally understand how completely meaningless a rumor actually is." His fist shook at his side as he said it. "Please accept my apology. I would very much like the 2 of us to get along properly from now on." She admitted privately to herself, extremely and thoroughly dazed by all of this. And she should have been. In the life she remembered, Philip had never once apologized to her for anything. The way certain students looked at her had shifted as well, and all of it in a single morning. Which meant something enormous, and for a moment she almost did not dare to finish the thought properly. If this much could be changed, then Ferdinand's ending could be changed along with it. It was not fixed. "I accept your apology," she said, and shook the hand of a boy who used to trip her in corridors. "I have business to attend to, so I'll be going." She was already scanning the length of the colonnade. Boots stopped on gray stone. "Sir Ferdinand?" she said, to the back of a man she had watched die once. He turned, gold-haired against the white stone of the building, and waited politely for the rest of it. "Just the 2 of us. There is something I need to say to you. Could you spare me a moment somewhere?" They walked out to the far colonnade, where the wind was loud enough to swallow most voices whole. "Thank you for making the time," she said, and held her own arm to stop her hands from moving. "The reason I asked to see you today," she began, and then lost the sentence entirely halfway through it. He did not fill the silence for her. He simply stood there and let her take as long as she needed to take. "I can give you as much time as you want," he said eventually. "There is genuinely no hurry at all." however. His hand closed around hers, careful of the bandage he could feel underneath the glove. When this conversation ends, you are going straight to the infirmary. That part is not negotiable, my lady. 2 hands, one of them wrapped in linen, held together between them in the flowering afternoon light. Don't misread this, she told herself, in the flat internal voice she used for battlefield reports. Ferdin is kind to everybody. He is scrupulously fair to everybody, without a single exception anywhere. Compassion is simply how the man is built. None of it has ever once been specifically about her. He must resent being shackled to me. He has just never allowed a second of it to show on his face. Sir Ferdin, she said. His Majesty gave you orders for a demon subjugation this season, didn't he? How could you possibly know that? Did you hear it from Sir Karen? He had gone suddenly very still. I also know that my own name is already written down on that subjugation roster. The reason I asked you out here today, she said, is to ask you for exactly one thing. Please do not do anything at all for my sake. Not one word to anyone, not for me, not ever. At that same moment, in the second prince's office, a briefing was already well underway. Demon subjugation is one of the events this academy runs on a fixed and unchangeable cycle. The roster takes the top 5 of each class from swordsmanship and magic, plus a detachment of frontline knights. And for this particular subjugation, Derek said, turning the page around to face all of them, every one of you has been selected, along with Ferdin and myself. Congratulations, more or less. Aemon Hedor, swordsmanship, advanced class. Lilia, magic department, advanced class. And so on down the list. Being selected is one thing, Aemon said, stretching out in his chair until it creaked underneath him. But why are you the one giving this briefing instead of Ferdin? Is that insubordination, technically? Your devotion to your lord really is remarkable, Aemon added. Loyalty, would you call it? Something like that? Derek made a noise like a boiling kettle, and Aemon looked extremely pleased with his afternoon. I haven't heard any of the details either, said the young man standing quietly by the wall. Erin Reethers, Aemon said. No, sorry, your sister. Performed the Reethers family style perfectly. Karen's head came up so fast that everyone else in the room heard his collar move. That's impossible, she has never learned it. Nobody in that house ever taught her a single form. He remembered her copying him from a corner of the garden, badly, and then one day simply stopping. Just what exactly, he thought, staring at nothing, has been happening to my sister this year. He sat down slowly on the arm of the couch and stopped hearing anything else in the room. There is one very unexpected name on this roster, Derek said, tapping it. Erin Reethers. The Marquis must be delighted, Aemon grinned, both his children on a glorious subjugation together. It makes no sense at all for my sister to participate in this, Karen said, very quietly. You were in that class today, Derek said, turning to Aemon. So how was she, honestly? Aemon closed his eyes and pressed one fist against his chest. I never thought I would say this out loud. It was flawless swordsmanship. Absolutely flawless. Karen made a sound of genuine physical agony. No matter what happens, Karen said, standing up, I cannot let my sister go on that subjugation. Derek raised an eyebrow at him. Why is he suddenly like this? Are those two even close at all? Everybody in the Empire knew that the Reethers siblings could not stand to be in a room together. Then, from the corner of the office, somebody began to laugh, and it went on slightly too long. What enviable sibling affection, the white-haired girl said, wiping at the corner of her eye. I had a brother exactly like that once. He used to wait up for me every single night, without fail. She walked between them without hurrying at all, and the temperature of the whole room dropped. But I will never see him again. Not once, not ever, for the rest of my entire life. Because of your sister Karen Reethers. Go on. Say her name to me one more time. Because of your sister, she repeated, and the black roses behind her seemed to lean in and listen. Now I will never be able to see him again, and you sit here worrying about yours. That's enough, Lilia, Aemon said. That rumor was never confirmed by anybody, and you know it. Rumor, she said, and smiled at him with absolutely no warmth anywhere in her face at all. You're telling me the story that his sister killed my brother is only a rumor? Is that it? And if it were only a rumor, then I would like one of you to explain something to me. Why does every single person in this entire empire believe it as an established fact? Derek and Aemon looked at one another, and neither of them had an answer ready to give her. Karen sat there and said nothing at all in his sister's defense, and he would spend years trying to take that silence back. I don't care whether she joins the hunt, Lilia said. But if she does, expect nothing whatsoever from me. I'll have to hold my magic back constantly, she added sweetly, so that it doesn't find her by accident. Karen's fist closed hard around empty air at his side and simply stayed there, shaking. Then the door opened, and the temperature in that room changed for the second time in a minute. Ferdin, Derek said, standing up much too quickly for a man attempting to appear perfectly calm. The prince crossed to the table and set his gloves down on it without looking at anybody. A hand landed on his shoulder from behind. He turned, mildly surprised, and let it stay exactly where it was. 5 people in one room, and not one of them willing to be the first to ask the obvious question. It's obvious Aaron Reathers caused trouble again, Derek said. What exactly did she demand this time? Ferdin looked down at the surface of the table for a moment before he answered any of them. She said she already knew about the Emperor's order, and that she would be going on the hunt as well. She said that she wanted to go, that I shouldn't argue against the order anywhere on her behalf, and that the only reason she asked to see me at all was to tell me to do nothing whatsoever for her. He rubbed his forehead and let out a long breath. I have a feeling about this, he said. Aaron is going to be standing in that hunting party, whatever any single one of us tries to do about it. In her room, Aaron dropped backward onto the bed. Tired, and I barely did anything at all today. She slid down onto the floor and sat with her back against the bed frame, thinking the whole thing through. Past life or this one, her participation in that hunt had never actually been in question at any point. Because it was the Emperor's own order, and the Emperor of Lexia did not accept requests from anybody. Didn't House Reathers push extremely hard to have their daughter transferred? Then she must be skilled. In the life before this one, Ferdin had gone into that throne room and argued for her anyway. Are you disobeying my orders? The Emperor had asked him, and that had been the end of the discussion. He was ignored, and he never once told her he had tried. She only found out about it far too late. Eventually, the hunting party rode out, with her tied into the middle of the column like baggage. During that hunt, her brother Karen lost one of his arms, taken off cleanly below the shoulder. And Ferdin lost the woman he had loved before any of this arrangement started, Princess Asalee. Because when it came down to a choice between the two of them, he turned and saved Aaron instead. For that one decision, he earned the permanent hatred of the strongest swordmaster in the Empire. Duke Asalee never forgave it, and he never once had to say so out loud to anybody at court. From that night onward, the second prince's position began quietly rotting out from underneath him. None of it is going to happen this time, she thought, closing her hand around the grip of the sword. Not Karen's arm, not Asalee, not the slow collapse of every single thing that man was owed. The party departs in 1 month. Until then, stamina and mana reserves, as much of both as she could build. The door banged open hard enough to rattle the flowers standing on the windowsill. Ka, Karen? She looked up with a training glove still hanging half off one hand. You, he said, and the single word came out cracked straight down the middle of it. She waited. He had exactly the same face he had worn at 9 years old, furious and frightened at once. He grabbed her collar, then immediately loosened his grip again as though the fabric had burned him. Why are your hands worse than they were before? He demanded, staring at the fresh bandages on them. And you told the prince you would go on the hunt? And where exactly did you learn the family style? He wanted to shout every word of that. What actually came out of his mouth was nothing at all. He let go of her, stepped back, and pressed one hand flat against his own chest to steady it. I heard you're joining the monster hunt, he said. Do you understand what that sentence actually means? It means you might die out there. I know that, she said, and walked past him to the window. It's the Emperor's order. Even Sir Ferdin cannot stop it happening, so I am going to go. How can you possibly be this calm about it, he said, and he looked genuinely afraid of her now. Do you not understand what a monster hunt is? Or have you completely lost your grip on reality? Lilia's going on that hunt specifically to take revenge on this family, and that is not even all of it. Every other person in that party already thinks the worst of you, and you still say you want to go? She looked at the floorboards while her little brother slowly ran out of breath in front of her. Yes, she said, because the only way to change how all of you die is to be standing there when it happens. He stared at her, and for the very first time he was looking at somebody he had never actually met. They stood together in the dim room, brother and sister, exactly 1 month away from that forest. 1 month later. Departure day. Carts loaded, horses saddled, a sky with no weather in it at all. Riders in violet cloaks gathered in the yard while the light came up slowly through the morning mist. Lilia's older brother Aaron thought, running a glove down a horse's neck. He was once my servant. I'll be the young lady's personal attendant starting today. My name is Calypso. He had been smiling then. Not long afterward, he came home in a box, and Lilia was the one who had to open it. Rage made her the finest mage in her year. Rage is extremely efficient if you can survive carrying it. Now that girl was riding into a forest beside Aaron with a full month of preparation behind her. All of it aimed at avenging a brother whose death Aaron still could not explain to anybody alive. And neither of those two women yet knew who had actually put Calypso into that coffin. The column rode out under a sky the exact color of a match at the moment it strikes. Hooves on a packed forest road, with gold light coming in sideways through the leaves. 30 riders, 4 wagons, and enough unspoken grievance between them to start a small private war. No matter how I look at it, Derek thought, watching the middle of the column, that pair is far too strange. You rode for a long time. Doesn't it hurt anywhere? Karen asking his sister that, out loud, in public. And since when did you even know how to ride at all? The two of them were being suspiciously civil. They're doing something behind my back, Derek decided, and filed it neatly beside his other worries. Lilia's silence was much harder to ignore. She had not complained about anything all day long. Aaron knew exactly what that particular smile meant because she had seen it on a battlefield before. Something had almost happened in the courtyard before departure. She had felt it gathering behind her. Then Lilia had simply stepped back and smiled and said nothing at all. That was considerably worse. And there was the other problem, riding in a curtained carriage near the front of the column. Princess Asalee had come on this subjugation as well. Of course she had. Naturally she had. This was not a messy romance. 4 separate people on this road were scheduled to lose something enormous. This subjugation was not going to be simple, in a great many different directions all at once. Ferdin, Derek said, riding up alongside him, after this hunt, reconsider that engagement seriously. When you graduate, those of us loyal to you formally become your knights. That's a year away now. 4 young men kneeling in the light, swearing an oath that would eventually decide an entire empire. By then, the first prince will have finished assembling his own faction to stand against you. And the first prince has his majesty personally standing behind him. You begin from behind, Ferdin. Keep Aaron Reithers, and you will spend those years managing scandals instead of fighting anybody. Derek, the prince said mildly, have you ever watched her cause trouble yourself? Or did somebody simply tell you that she does? Of course I have. She's the villainess of House Reithers. Everybody in the capital knows that. They're losing a reputation built over centuries because of one daughter. Lucky she isn't an only child. Derek opened his mouth to supply a specific example, and stopped and frowned at the road ahead. I've never seen her do it, he said finally, and did not at all enjoy hearing himself say the words. This is open ground, the captain shouted down the column. We make camp right here for the night. Riders swung down under the black trees while the last of the sunlight went out behind the ridge. Aaron stood a little apart from them, watching the horses, quietly counting how many would come home. Derek, said Ferdin quietly, once they were alone. If everything they say about her past is a lie, then who exactly is ever going to compensate her for it? Answer that one question for me. She was standing in the last of the light with her hair coming loose, entirely unaware of any of it. That is an enormous leap, Your Highness, Derek said carefully. And there's something else. Don't say any part of that where Lilia can hear you. Not one syllable of it ever. Later, beside the fire, 2 black gloves tore a strip of red cloth into rough field bandages. Then the same hands took a knife to a cooking pot with an unhurried competence nobody expected. She cooks? Karen said, appalled. A woman who has never taken a single lesson except etiquette? Here, she said, and pushed a bowl at him across the fire. Oh. Ah. Thank you, I suppose. Above the camp, the stars came out over a forest absolutely full of things that hunt at night. Eamon shoveled in a mouthful and stopped complaining for the first time in about 6 hours. Delicious. Sister, Karen said to the cooking pot rather than to the person sitting next to it. She had been like a flower when they were small. That was the word he had always used for her. And nobody in the world dislikes flowers. He had never once imagined a version of himself who disliked her. Sister, are you going to see stepmother? Have the two of you become close now without me? Give me some of your time as well, he had said, hanging off her arm at 8 years old. In another room, a hand came down hard and two much smaller hands entirely failed to block it. Sorry, Erin had whispered afterward, head bowed, hair hanging down over most of her face. I'm a bit late today. I see, said her brother, and did not understand one single thing about it. I'll go now, she said. After that, he kept trying to close the distance between them somehow. And every year that distance quietly got wider, and nobody ever explained to him why it was happening. He cried about it in an empty drawing room, where somebody had been patiently waiting to find him. Karen, why are you crying? Stepmother? My sister has changed so much this year, I don't know her. I don't understand any of it. Even the servants are saying terrible things about her now. It seems Erin has had a change of heart, Corellia murmured. Perhaps keep some distance for a while. Don't worry at all. Your mother will take care of Erin. And she smiled over the top of the boy's head. By the campfire, years later, Karen pressed one hand to his own cheek and stared into the flames. Every single thing he believed about his sister had been carefully planted there by somebody else. They sat on crates together, eating badly cooked stew under a sky absolutely crowded with stars. So how is life in the swordsmanship department, he asked, aiming for casual and missing by a mile. Bearable, she said. Isn't it hard keeping up with all of them? Not really, no. They stood together outside the tent afterward, neither of them talking, neither of them leaving either. Why are you suddenly smiling like that? Just thinking about something, she said. It's been a long time since we sat like this. And it's strange, hearing you call me sister again. A girl with flowers in her hair and a very serious small boy looking up at her 12 years ago. Who cares about that? He sputtered at her. I'm only calling you sister because, obviously. Then Boots came out of the dark toward the fire and Eamon's voice arrived a moment ahead of him. Let's see whether you can still stomach your food, he said, watching Lilia across the flames. With a murderer sitting there grinning right in front of her. Are you genuinely this clueless? Or are you simply indifferent? Erin set her bowl down on the crate and did not look up at him. Is the food even going down your throat? Eamon went on, thoroughly enjoying himself now. A murderer laughing in front of the girl whose brother she buried. What a picture that makes. Erin looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a wound, steadily and without any heat in it. Are you oblivious, he said, biting into an apple, or do you simply not care about any of it? Don't pick a fight with me, Sir Amon, Karen said, coming up off the crate onto his feet. They say you don't disturb even a dog while it's eating. Are you somehow worse than a dog? That's enough, Karen. Somebody caught his arm, and somebody else drew a handspan of bright steel. Even you, Eamon said softly. And the rest of the blade came the whole way out of the scabbard. Two men locked together in the blue dark, one of them holding, the other one straining forward. Stop it, said Ferdin, and every moving thing in that clearing stopped exactly where it was. Ferdin, Derek said slowly, staring at him across the fire. Don't tell me. Please don't tell me. You are not taking that woman's side right now. In front of every person in this camp, are you? Erin sat very still beside a violet lantern and watched the whole thing get steadily worse. This is not good, she thought. Every single person in this camp is now watching the two of us. If it looks like the second prince is publicly defending me, both of us pay for it later. So she stood up. I hear that Sir Amon is a genius of the sword, she said, perfectly pleasantly. Clearly a rumor. So far, all I have actually seen is a sharp tongue. Do you have a death wish, girl? If you want one that badly, Amon said, standing, I would be delighted to grant it right here. That won't do at all, said a voice from the tree line, light and clear as a struck bell. Duels are not allowed on a subjugation, you know. Everyone turned, then everyone knelt. Golden hair, white dress, folded hands, and a smile with nothing behind it that anybody could name. My lady, somebody gasped, and half the camp went down onto one knee in the dirt. A person loved by absolutely everybody in the empire, and not by any kind of accident. Frequently ill from an excess of holy power, and never once absent from a single subjugation. The saintess of the Lexia Empire, Lady Asalee, and the woman Ferdin had loved before all of this. My lady, why have you come out in this cold? Her attendant said, hurrying to reach her. A knight took her hand as she stepped down over the frozen ruts of the wagon track. I heard there was a commotion out here, she said brightly, so naturally I came to look at it. Hello, Lady Reathers. We've crossed paths a few times, but never actually faced each other before. It's an honor to meet you properly, Erin said, and bowed exactly as deep as protocol demanded. In the last life, the two of them had never exchanged a single word. Not one, in 2 years of war. Asalee had stayed inside her carriage until the monsters came, and after that she had died early. And now the Saintess was looking at her, and had been looking at her for slightly too long. She must be displeased with me, Aaron thought. I am engaged to the man she was supposed to marry. My lady, her attendant said nervously, as Asalee stepped closer without any warning at all. Lady Rethers, she said, and tilted her head like a bird studying something small and edible. Aren't you an interesting person? The words landed very strangely in the cold night air. Just then, Aaron thought, her eyes seemed to actually sparkle. Why on earth would they sparkle? Come to think of it, a duel would be acceptable. Nobody in that clearing thought to ask why a Saintess wanted to watch one. 3 grown men turned to stare at her with 3 completely identical expressions of horror. That's still allowed, isn't it? She said, folding her hands. I so rarely get to watch anything. If that is milady's wish, said Amon, bowing low, then I have no objection whatsoever to it. Wonderful, said the Saintess. Then let's go at once. And she led them into the trees herself. Huh, said Derek, to nobody in particular, as the entire camp got up and followed her. Birds went up off the branches in the dark, and something much further out answered them. They faced each other in a clearing with the Saintess standing between them, hands pressed together. The rule is to avoid injuring one another as far as possible. Fight fairly and squarely, both of you. After all, we came all the way out here to subjugate monsters, not people. Isn't that right? Then, she said and smiled, and light spilled out from behind her into the clearing. Begin. Steel opened the dark. He came in fast, technically correct, and completely without any waste. Aemon Hedor, she thought, giving ground twice on purpose to see how he followed it. The reputation was earned. There was not one unnecessary movement anywhere in the man's form. And in her last life, this man had been the knight Ferdin personally ordered to keep her alive. Foul-mouthed, lazy, never a master, he understood chivalry better than anyone else she ever met. He threw himself between her and a beast twice his own weight without pausing to think about it. And after Ferdin died, when that order no longer bound him to anything or anyone at all, he kept it regardless right up until the second his heart stopped in a field outside the capital. At the edge of the clearing, a Saintess watched the duel with both hands pressed to her chest. No matter how much I owe this man, Aaron thought, that was that, and this is very much this. His eyes went wide over the crossed blades. She was no longer standing where she had been. Karen, at the edge of the ring, entirely forgot the mechanics of how breathing was supposed to work. Fast, Aemon thought, and the thought arrived far too late to be of any use to him at all. Am I being overpowered in raw strength? By her? That isn't possible, that genuinely cannot be. She turned his blade aside with her wrist and stepped straight through the gap into his guard. Then she came down out of the air and hit him hard enough to lift him clean off his feet. Blue light fell through the branches onto an empty patch of trampled ground. Asalee stood among the trees, smiling, and did not look the slightest bit surprised by any of it. Somewhere underwater, far from the clearing, something enormous moved in the dark and kept moving. Aemon landed on his knees in the violet light with absolutely no sword left in his hand. Did I just get hit by Aaron Rethers, he thought? By a complete and total novice. Your eyes still look like you haven't come to your senses, she said, lowering the blade slowly. That's fine, though. You'll wake up eventually if somebody keeps hitting you hard enough. Huh, said Aemon from the ground, in the voice of a man revising his entire worldview at speed. And from the tree line came a scream that had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with fear. She raised the blade one more time, and the blue light ran the entire length of the steel. Then she sheathed it, unhurried, in front of 40 people who had all stopped breathing at once. Aemon lay flat on the forest floor with his sword lying 3 full paces away from his hand. He said to the sky above him, and then had to start the sentence over again. I lost. I lost to Aaron Rethers. He said it twice, testing whether it got easier. It did not get easier. Lady Rethers, said the Saintess, appearing at her elbow the way weather appears over a valley. The duel is over now? She was still wearing that same completely unreadable little smile. Yes, said Aaron, and thought, wasn't she trying to punish me through Sir Amon just now? But her expression was the expression of somebody who had expected this exact result all along. How did you do that? Aemon demanded, rolling upright with his ribs, complaining loudly about it. You haven't been holding a sword for long. Weeks. Not even a full season from what I heard. I remember your hands at that party. Pristine. Like they had never held a needle, let alone a hilt. a gloved hand lifting a wineglass under chandeliers, 2 winters ago, in another version of this life. "You who knows nothing about swords or a knight's honor," he said, his voice climbing. "How can somebody like you possibly have skill like that?" She never got the chance to answer him, because something with far too many legs came out of the tree line directly behind his back. She put a knife through its throat over his shoulder. "What are you doing?" he gasped at her. "Moving," she said, already past him, already somewhere else entirely in the dark tree line. A horned shape dropped out of the canopy and hit the ground hard enough to shake the whole clearing. Red eyes opened in the undergrowth, then more of them, then a great many more than anyone could fight. "Damn it!" somebody shouted as the entire forest started making the same low grinding sound. "Since when were there ever this many?" Aemon said, and the ground underneath them answered him. They fought back to back in green light while the trees came apart on every side of them. 3 of them ran the forest path under rain, weapons out, with no formation left at all. "My lady!" the attendant cried out, as Asali's knees simply folded underneath her on the path. She was still smiling even then, which somehow made the whole thing considerably more frightening. A wolf the size of a cart came out of the rain and stood directly over her body. Aaron took its head off with a single downward cut and did not even slow her stride. Aemon caught the Saintess before she hit the mud, and she weighed almost nothing in his arms. "The young lady is having an attack. There are too many of them. I can't get any speed carrying her." "This way," he shouted back, pointing through the trees. "There's somewhere we can hide down here." The moon came out over a forest that was still very much looking for the 3 of them. A bear with red eyes lifted its head. Behind it, something enormous with feathers did exactly the same. Horned shapes moved through the undergrowth in a line, unhurried, methodical, sweeping the ground. A gray bird sat on a branch and watched all of them pass without making any sound at all. 2 of them pressed into the hollow under the rock, breathing as quietly as they knew how to. "I can't say we're safe," Aemon whispered, "but we can at least catch our breath for a minute." The monsters are surfacing faster than they ever should, Aaron thought, and considerably stronger. Mid-tier or above, almost every one of them. Is any of that connected to my coming back here? "Hey, Aaron Reathers, let me see your back." What is wrong with this man? She thought wearily. "Your wound," he snapped at her. "I'm putting medicine on it, so sit still and stop arguing. You took that saving me earlier tonight. Don't make me say the words out loud a second time." He looked at the blood soaking through the back of her collar, and his jaw tightened noticeably. "It's hard to reach on your own," he muttered at the rock wall. "That is genuinely all this is." "Lady Asili," Aaron said, watching her breathe. "Why did that attack come on so suddenly out there?" "She carries far too much divine power. It happens often. The monster's aura probably set it off." "I see," said Aaron, and sat very straight while a near stranger bandaged her back in the dark. "This situation," she decided privately, "is deeply uncomfortable, and I would like it to end soon." "When I was a child," Aemon said suddenly, addressing the rock wall rather than the person in front of him. "My father took me down into the underground prison once. I never did work out exactly why. Maybe to frighten some ambition into a lazy son. Maybe some lesson about sin and its consequences. Either way, I still remember one particular prisoner they were keeping down there that day. They had hung him on the wall like a parcel. And Aemon was 3 sentences away from working out where he had seen those marks again. And he was covered, from the neck all the way down, in scars that were already years old. His hands stopped moving on the bandage. He did not turn around to look at her face. "Just like your back," he said. "Exactly like your back, Lady Reathers. Identical, in fact." The rain kept falling outside the hollow, and she said nothing at all for quite a while. "Who did this to you? Who would dare do this to a daughter of a marquise's house in his own home?" She stood up instead of answering him. "Suramon, go back first and take the lady with you." "What?" he said. She was already tightening the strap on her scabbard against her hip. "Lady Asali's breathing has been getting faster for some time now. You must have noticed it. I'll draw them off. You get her clear of the ridge while every one of them is following me." "What in the world do you take me for? If anyone runs, it should be you, with her, right now." "I can't run as fast as you can, Suramon, so go and bring back help before it gets light." He stared at her, and something behind his face rearranged itself permanently in that moment. Further down the valley, 2 men looked up as the tree line above them started shaking hard. Something huge went past in the dark, close enough to hear, and neither of them saw what it was. "This is strange," Ferdin said. "I can hear them roaring, but they aren't getting any closer to us. Is that a monster? He said, and drew his blade, and the branches in front of him parted. Amon, somebody shouted, catching him as he came through, half carrying the unconscious Saintess. The ground started shaking, Eamon gasped. All of it at once. We couldn't hold position for a minute. Wait, Ferdin said, and the entire night seemed to narrow down to one single point in front of him. Why are there only two of you? Where is Dame Erin? We got separated. She said she'd be the decoy. Nobody spoke after that. Somewhere far behind them, the forest was still making a great deal of noise. Swing. The first one came apart at the shoulder before it had finished standing upright. Kill. There was no thought at all behind any of it, and that was very much the entire point. Two more circled her in the dark, cutting off the path behind, and she let them do it, and counted. This, she thought, spinning both blades level, is the only thing I ever became genuinely good at. Something she had repeated 10,000 times across the entire length of her third life. In that world under a red moon, the monsters had already taken most of the map from the living. Law had stopped existing there. Killing swarms was not a decision anyone made, it was simply breathing. And in that life, she had reached the top of the discipline, the place almost nobody ever reaches. Swordmaster. The title cost her 40 years and every single person she had ever spoken to. If she had found the talent early in her first life, could she have saved every one of them? She had asked herself that question in 3 separate bodies and never once managed to answer it. Back then, I protected nobody at all, she thought, driving the blade down hard through bone. 3 of them came at her through the rain together, and by that point she was actually smiling. But this time, she thought, I will. Even if it costs me exactly what it cost me the last time. The clearing emptied out around her. She was the only thing still standing anywhere in it. Meanwhile, further down the valley, the rescue party was quietly tearing itself to pieces. What do you mean my sister volunteered as the bait? Karen said. Very quietly indeed. Did you abandon her out there to save your own skin? And you call yourself a knight of the Empire? We have to go back for her right now, Ferdin said. That was not offered as a suggestion. 2 hands met in the lamplight as Amon was hauled back onto his feet by somebody. Erin Reether's volunteering as bait for a swarm, said Lilia. That sounds like a woman asking to die. The Saintess lay against a tree with her eyes closed, breathing shallow and slow and uneven. A woman shouldn't die that easily, Ferdin said, without bothering to turn around and face her. And is that the actual reason you're going after her? Lilia asked him. Only that? Nothing else? Lilia, somebody said sharply. Watch your mouth. Karen was already halfway out of his seat. Ferdin looked at her exactly once, and the argument ended without another word being spoken by anyone. They gathered their gear under the stars while the Saintess was carried up onto a horse. Sir Karen, calm down. What matters right now is getting Lady Erin back out of there alive. You should have sent word for reinforcements before you ran, somebody else added, less kindly. If anything at all has happened to my sister, Karen told Amon, I will not be letting it go. You disgrace. You don't know the first thing about honor, and you never have. How? Eamon thought, watching him walk away. How does someone with no honor fight like that? He stood alone under the stars, with an answer slowly forming that he did not like at all. Meanwhile, on another forest path entirely, under a moon that had stopped helping anybody, she was limping. She had been limping for about a mile now and had entirely stopped noticing it. I erased my tracks, she thought, with the blood drying on her cheek. Nobody is going to follow me. She had killed them with sword energy only a master can produce. Nobody alive would suspect her. If I circle wide and rejoin the knights before dawn, she thought, and then she stopped walking. Her boots stood absolutely still on the wet ground for a very long moment. Should I, she thought, with the rain coming down through the white light between the branches? Should I really go back to them at all? It was the first time she had let herself ask it. Calyps, she thought, and the name went straight through her like a splinter under a nail. Pleased to meet you, Lady Erin. I'm Calyps, assigned as your personal attendant starting today. He was one of the handful of people she had never once managed to forget, in any of her lives. You must tell the Marquis what the madam has been doing to you, he had said, standing in the doorway. If it's too hard to do alone, I'll stand right next to you. Tell him when he comes back from the front. But what if he decides I'm useless the moment I open my mouth, she had asked him, 12 years old. That isn't true. The Marquis loves you, my lady. He said it like a fact, not like a comfort. He was the only person in that entire house who ever gave her any courage about anything. Her only friend. So she had believed him, and she had spoken to her father, and then, "Look at this, Aaron," her stepmother's voice, calling down pleasantly from the top of the stairs. This mother caught a rat. There was a body on the tiles and a great deal of blood between them. That insolent man had the nerve to warn me about something that never actually happened. "Because somebody spread such lies about me," Corellia said pleasantly, "I had to kill a servant." I should have said I wasn't being hit, Aaron thought, sitting down on those same cold tiles. But it had been too heavy to carry alone, and she had told him, and he had died of it. She had screamed until her voice broke in her throat, and none of it changed anything at all. Calip's fell, and Aaron fell with him, and the rain came in through the open door behind them. His cold body was sent home in a cart to a sister who had been waiting up for him all week. And thanks to her stepmother's version of events, it looked exactly like Aaron had killed him herself. By then, her reputation was past all repair, so nobody in the Empire bothered to check the story. Now she stood in another reign, 10 years earlier, with the same blood still on her hands. Why this exact point in time? A few years earlier, and Calip's would be alive somewhere tonight. But Lady Assalee had survived this evening, and Lady Assalee was very definitely supposed to be dead. So the future can move. And if she simply died out here instead of walking back into that camp? Something moved on the path behind her. Whoever came around that bend in the next minute would decide whether she lived at all. Somebody is coming, she thought, and by then it was much too late to erase anything at all. "Lady Aaron," said a voice out of the rain, and it was the very last voice she wanted to hear. She stood there in a torn shirt with blood on her arm and finally, helplessly, started to cry. Of all the people in that hunting party, she thought, why did it have to be you who found me? "Lady Aaron," Ferdin shouted, running toward her, and she had no plan prepared for any of this. At that same hour, far away across the Empire, the lights were still burning at the Reithers estate. A woman in black sat by the window with a glass of wine and the rain running down the glass. Red eyes over the rim of the cup. She had been waiting all evening for word from that forest. And the word she was expecting to receive was that her stepdaughter had not come back out of it. A few days later, at the castle of the Marquis of Reithers, on the northern edge of the Empire, the walls were lined with armed men, as if the house were daring somebody to try the gates. 2 guards stood at the ironwork holding spears they very clearly knew how to use properly. For the household of a mere marquis, it was an absurdly large standing force to keep fed. All of it earned on the front line, and all of it proof of exactly how high that man actually stood. And in his absence, the person enjoying all of that power, wealth, and inherited honor, ruling his castle like a queen in his place, the Marchioness Corellia Reithers. Red roses on a lacquered table, cut fresh that morning by her own gloved hand. "It's been over 10 years since I married into this house," she said, taking up the shears again. "Dresses ordered from the capital, attendants who come running at the sound of a single bell. I've grown so used to a Marchioness's privileges that I may genuinely miss them when I go back." A petal came off and fell. She smiled at the man standing very still behind her chair. "Raymond," she said, "do you truly need to return to your original appearance again? You've hidden every trace of a sword hand with black magic. That form won't suit a Marchioness." 10 years earlier, in a throne room, a man in red had said, "I've heard about your remarkable skills." She had stood with her back to a high window that night and simply let him look at her. A high-ranking knight stronger than the Marquis of Reithers himself. Is that description accurate? "I am honored, Your Majesty," she had answered him without once lifting her eyes off the floor. "I summoned you because I need your strength. Do you know how many swordmasters this empire has?" 3, she said. 3, he agreed. Across the entire continent, there are not even 10 of them alive. And a swordmaster answers to absolutely nobody. That is the whole problem with the breed. "Only 3, he repeated, tapping the arm of the throne slowly. "And not one of the 3 is mine. I sit at the highest seat in this empire, and I cannot make those 3 men move an inch. See to it that they cannot run rampant any longer, Dame Corellia. I will obey, Your Majesty." "It has been a very long time indeed," she said to the roses on the table, still smiling to herself. His Majesty had wanted House Reithers for years, because House Reithers kept producing masters. So she had spent an entire decade inside it, quietly taking apart its single greatest asset. Not the estate and not the knights, the children, the seedlings, as she liked to call them. And it had gone perfectly, because the Marquis almost never came home from that front line. Then a report arrived from the Northern Forest, sealed, written in a courier's cramped hand. The Academy squad completed the mission. All returned alive, thanks to a passing swordmaster. She read it through twice. A passing swordmaster, she said out loud. A passing one. Her fist came down on the table hard enough to split the wood along the grain underneath. Glass burst across the floor and a decanter went over into a slowly spreading red pool. "Forgive the intrusion," a maid said from the doorway, hands raised. "I heard a loud noise, my lady." "My hand slipped," said the Marchioness, absolutely radiant. "Would you clean all this up for me?" "Right away, my lady. You aren't hurt anywhere, are you?" "Not in the slightest," she said sweetly. "Then I'll take my leave." The girl bowed, shut the door, and never once looked back at her. "Does any of this make sense to you, Raymond?" The smile had gone entirely out of her face now. "The message that arrived yesterday," he said. "Yes, it is genuinely very strange indeed. One of a handful of masters on the continent, passing through that precise forest, on that precise night. Lady Astley was supposed to die out there. Duke Astley would have cast Ferd and Lexia aside forever. Do you have any idea what it cost me to force that engagement onto the second prince? And some passing swordsman undid every part of it in one night. 10 years of work in one night." Raymond crouched down and began picking broken glass out of the rug without being asked to. "If you keep breaking things, my lady," he said mildly, "it will eventually start causing you trouble." She breathed until her hands finally stopped shaking, which took considerably longer than usual. "There are rumors coming out of Atenzi Academy now," she said at last, from the window, "that Aaron has been using a sword. Sir Reckon claims he stood there and watched her do it. A girl in a night forest holding a blade the way somebody holds one after 40 years of practice." Corellia stood in the dark of the room and remembered a very much smaller person entirely. "I still remember the day I first met that child," she said. "She was 7 years old." "Nice to meet you," the girl had said, hands folded neatly. "From now on, may I call you mother?" "I am not your mother, you bothersome brat." The child had kept smiling for almost a full week after that. Eyes full of nothing except trust. The particular grace of one single flower opening in a garden. Later, she watched that child on the terrace, trying to copy her brother's forms entirely from memory. How did Karen swing it again? I think it went something a little bit like this, maybe. And the shape the girl made, without one single lesson from anybody, was very nearly perfect. "Oh, maybe not," the child said, frowning at her own hands. "I only saw it once, so I don't remember." That child had the talent to become a swordmaster. The exact thing Corellia had wanted her whole life. So she took a cane to it. Every night, for years, with something very close to medical precision. "I was wrong. It's all my fault," the girl screamed on the floor. "Please, please stop, please." Raymond had stood in that doorway on those nights and never once intervened in any of it. She had broken the frame a master needs, deliberately, joint by joint, over the course of 10 years. Then one night, a servant walked in and found her standing over the wreckage of an evening. "To do such a thing to Lady Erin," Calypso had said to her. "Have you no fear of heaven at all? God will never forgive you for this." He was on his knees at the time and he still said it. She closed her eyes and smiled at the memory the way other people smile at an old wedding portrait. The servant was an unplanned bonus, she admitted. "I hadn't actually intended to kill anyone that week. But from that day onward, Erin was completely broken. The girl stopped speaking for 2 whole months. So in the end, it wasn't a bad choice at all. It saved me several more years of patient work." "None of this will last much longer either way," she said, turning back toward the window. "His Majesty has begun to move in earnest now. The plan cannot be allowed to go wrong again. Go to Atenzi Academy, Raymond. Confirm whether that girl can genuinely hold a sword or not. With her bones in the state, I left them. Even starting now, she could never exceed high-ranking knight. But if she truly can use one," the Marchioness said, tilting a bare blade toward the candlelight, "then it wouldn't hurt anybody at all if she happened to lose a wrist in an unfortunate accident." "Understood?" Raymond looked up at her from the floor and said nothing for a very long moment. Then he bowed and went to pack his things because he had never once refused her anything. At that same hour, across the Empire, in the East Dormitory of Atenzi Academy, a young man sat beside a bed in the last of the evening light, watching somebody breathe. A bandaged hand twitched once against the sheet, and he came instantly and completely awake. Green eyes opened in the dim room, focused slowly, found him sitting there beside her. And the woman that Marchioness had spent 10 years carefully breaking sat up in bed. Her eyes came open on an unfamiliar ceiling in a room full of warm, late-evening light. She lay still for a moment, taking careful inventory of which parts of her body still worked. A chair leg scraped hard against the floorboards as somebody came out of it far too fast. "Sister, are you awake? Are you actually awake?" He caught her before she slid off the bed entirely. "Where am I?" "Don't get up yet. The academy, your own room. You've been unconscious for days." "My clothes have been changed," she thought immediately. "Which means somebody has seen the scars." "You," Karen said, and both of his hands were visibly shaking where they gripped her shoulders. "Are you out of your mind? You almost died out there. You actually genuinely almost died. No matter how strong you think you are, what kind of person volunteers to be the bait?" He was shouting into her collarbone by then, which made arguing back considerably harder. If he had changed my clothes, she thought, the scars would have been his very first question. Which meant that somebody else had done it. And also, now that she thought of it, Karen's arm. In the life before, he had come out of that forest missing everything below his left shoulder. She looked at the hand gripping her sleeve, whole and warm and inconveniently still attached. "That's a relief," she said quietly, and her brother made an extremely outraged noise at her. "So why did you do something that could have killed you?" he said, and his voice cracked open. "Next time, never do that again. Never, under any circumstances. Are you actually listening to me?" For a second, it genuinely looked as though he was about to cry, which was completely ridiculous. It must be my imagination, she decided. "Lie down for longer," he ordered her, pointing. "I'm thirsty." He was out the door and back with water before she had finished the sentence. "By the way," he said, pouring it out, "you woke up while Ferd and Lexia wasn't here to see it. He kept coming to visit while you were unconscious. Frankly, it was becoming rather annoying." "Don't joke about something like that," she said, and took the cup with both bandaged hands. Sir Ferdin visiting my room, completely impossible, and she had made absolutely sure of that herself. "Sir Aaron," a voice had said in the rain, holding her while she bled into his sleeve. "Please wake up." "Sir Ferdin," she had answered him. "Yes," he said. "Please, go ahead and speak." "Please don't do this to me," she had said, and gripped his coat, and wept into it like a child. "Because everyone who has ever been kind to me is dead, and I cannot survive doing that twice." "Don't be kind to me." That was what she actually said to him. Those exact words in that order. After hearing that, there is no possible world in which that man comes to my room. "Give me the cup back," Karen said, and took it out of her hands with unnecessary force. "Still, it's fortunate the Academy approved the visit," he added, settling back into the chair. "Approved a visit," she said. "For whom exactly?" "Sir Raymond," he said. "Obviously, sister. Mother was terribly worried about you, so she asked the Academy to assign him as your personal guard." Her bandaged hands closed slowly together in her lap and did not open again for some time. "So Sir Raymond is coming here," she said, in a voice with absolutely nothing left inside it. At that same hour, in the conference room off the central hall, 4 young men were waiting. They sat around a marble table with the afternoon sun cutting long stripes across the floor. "Lately, there have been nothing but strange incidents," Derek said, and counted them off on his fingers. What was logged as a beginner pack turned out on arrival to be a full intermediate one. And that pack was cleared by a swordmaster who apparently happened to be walking past at the time. And whatever happened out there with Reathers has left Eamon behaving extremely oddly ever since. But the strangest one of all of them, Derek thought, glancing sideways down the table, is Ferdin, who has been sitting there with his eyes shut, saying absolutely nothing for an hour. "How is Sir Aaron? She hasn't woken yet. Aren't you busy, Your Highness? I'm not busy at all." "Not busy," Derek thought furiously. "He has been at that infirmary door every single day this week. And the subjugation report to His Majesty cannot possibly be delayed 1 more week after this." "What on earth are you thinking, Ferdin? What is actually happening to you at the moment?" Ferdin was thinking about a girl kneeling in the rain, telling him very calmly to hate her. "Sir Ferdin," she had said, with her blood soaking steadily through the whole of his sleeve. "Please don't do this to me. Don't be kind to me. Not you, of all the people here. Just hate me." That was the part he kept coming back to, over and over. Just hate me. Like everybody else does. Like it's the easiest and most obvious thing in the entire world. Why would she suddenly say something like that, he thought, for perhaps the 100th time? Does Sir Aaron hate me? Is that all it was? It had not sounded anything at all like hate. Or was she pushing me away deliberately because she doesn't want me standing anywhere near her? After calling everyone here, said a cold voice, how long do you intend to sit there in silence? You, Derek said, half out of his chair already. Watch how you speak to His Highness. Lilia is right, Derek. I called this meeting myself and then stopped attending my own meeting. But I don't see Princess Azalee anywhere. Does anybody know where she went this afternoon? She went to see Sir Aaron, Eamon said, and the entire room turned toward him as one. What? Said Derek. Did you just call her Sir Aaron? With honorifics? Out loud, in front of us? The princess heard she had woken and said to proceed without her. How deeply disrespectful. Sir Aaron has awakened, Ferdin repeated, and his hands came apart on the table in front of him. That's a relief, he murmured, and did not notice that he had said any of it out loud. Everyone here seems to have grown remarkably close to her, Lilia observed from her chair. We still have to report a strange demon surge and a master who appeared exactly on cue. How nice for all of you, celebrating a murderer's recovery without any of that on your minds. Lilia, that is far enough, Eamon said. You don't have the right to put it like that. And weren't you the one bragging about flattening her nose? One crisis and you've changed sides? Sir Ferdin, you especially should not be doing this. You, of all the people in this room. Your comrade is me, she said, and her voice broke on the last word of it. Not Aaron Reethers. Then she heard herself and heard the room and heard the silence that came in afterward. Nobody moved at all. 4 men looked down at their own hands and let her stand there alone. I got carried away, she thought, sitting down. That isn't what I came in here to say to them. I'm sorry, she said. I got a little excited. It won't happen again, Your Highness. What I'm trying to say is that the report is not the only thing we should be worrying about. Didn't any of you actually read the announcement the Academy posted on the board this morning? Duke Azalee is coming to Atenzi as an external guest instructor for the entire remaining term. Sir Ferdin, she said. The father of the woman you loved is arriving here, and he still doesn't know she was supposed to die. And the prince, who had been unreadable all afternoon, finally opened his eyes and looked up. Aaron's room, the following morning, with a clean sky sitting in the window frame. I am, Aaron thought very carefully, extremely flustered at this particular moment in time. Because the woman in the white dress sitting in her chair, beaming at her, was supposed to have died in that forest. They faced each other over a small table like 2 people at an extremely tense tea party. Why is the princess here? There is no reason for her to be. I heard it from Sir Amon. He told me you acted as a decoy so the rest of us could get clear of the ridge. Is that true? I wanted to thank you properly, in person. Not in a letter. In person, face to face. You really didn't have to, Aaron said. This person is strangely difficult to sit near. Absolutely not, said Azalee, standing up so fast that the chair rocked back on 2 legs. Are you hurt anywhere else? She had already taken hold of Aaron's bandaged wrist to check it. And, she sat back down again and folded her hands into a very complicated knot. I was the one who changed your clothes, Lady Reethers, while you were still unconscious. I haven't told a single person about the scars, and I never will. I promise you that much. I don't know what your situation is, she said, and took Aaron's hand in both of her own. But it was completely obvious that you didn't want anyone finding out, so nobody will. Princess Azalee, said Aaron after a silence that went on considerably too long. Don't you hate me? It came out much flatter than she had actually intended it to. Hate you? Why on earth would I ever do that? The princess looked genuinely appalled by the idea. Why? Aaron repeated, and had to look down at the table in order to keep going at all. You were with Sir Ferdin. The 2 of you ended it because of me. That is what everyone says. That's true, but no, I don't mean that I hate you, Lady Reethers. I only meant to say. She stopped and breathed out, and something behind her eyes went very carefully blank. There are certain circumstances involved, she said. Circumstances, Aaron repeated slowly. But I can tell you this much for absolute certain. I don't hate you at all, Lady Reethers. How could I possibly hate the person who saved my life out there? That would be absurd. So, with all of that settled, may I call you by your given name from now on? The person who saved her life, Aaron thought, and felt the words land somewhere entirely wrong. I have never once properly protected anybody, not in 3 entire lifetimes of trying to. That was exactly why the princess walking into her room had knocked her so far sideways. Lady Reethers, she had said from the doorway, glowing, I'm so terribly glad you're awake. Because she was alive. Because in the last life, this conversation had simply never existed. Aaron closed her eyes and let something in her chest unclench by exactly 1 single notch. Call me by my name, she said at last. Whatever you like. It's fine either way. The shriek that followed could be heard 2 floors down. I'll come and visit constantly. I look forward to knowing you properly, Erin. And she said it like she was handing over a gift. Erin sat there afterward with an expression she did not recognize at all on her own face. 2 hands still joined over a small table, in a room where nobody had been cruel to anyone. After that unexpected hour, she ran out of excuses entirely and went to afternoon class. Shouldn't you be resting longer, Dame Erin? And there was the second surprise of the day. What? Said a student somewhere behind them. Wait a moment. Did you just hear that? Sir Amon called Erin Reither's dame, and used formal address doing it, out loud, in public. But why? Hissed somebody else, appalled. That is exactly what I am asking you right now. Did the sun come up in the west this morning? What exactly are you doing? Eamon asked her, checking which direction the sun rose from. And? It's the same as always, unfortunately for me. Sir, why are you even here? You belong upstairs in the advanced class with the others. I changed classes, he said, adjusting his grip on a battered wooden practice blade. Down to the beginner class. What? She said. What does that actually mean exactly? Because to move up a single level in this department, tradition demands one particular thing. A mission handed down by the Emperor himself, subjugations, duels against veteran knights, real ones. Eamon had taken one of the highest-ranked missions on that board in order to get where he was. And he had come back from it eventually, at a price he had never once discussed with anybody. So why, she said, you would have to walk through all of that hell again from the beginning. I moved because I chose to, he said, because I found out that I am still nowhere near enough. A girl on her knees in the mud with a sword she could barely lift, and blood over everything. Him, wounded and useless, being dragged backward while somebody much smaller stayed behind. Go, she had screamed at him through the rain. I'll bring back help. Stay alive until then. Damn it, he had said, and let himself be pulled away and hated every single step of it. She had gone the other direction, alone, into a forest absolutely full of things that eat knights. It felt disgusting, he said now, leaving somebody behind like that, being that weak in front of her. And then, despite every part of it, he had lectured a young knight about the meaning of honor. When the person standing in that clearing overflowing with arrogance had very obviously been him. Erin stood in the warm light of the training hall and let him get all the way to the end of it. I want to apologize to you, he said. That is the entire reason I am standing here today. You clearly don't want to discuss any of it, so I won't ask, and I'll say nothing about what I saw. One thing only. When you have fully recovered, would you consider granting me a sparring match? She knew that particular look very well. She had worn it herself, in a body that no longer existed. The wish to protect somebody else, and the complete willingness to die in the middle of doing it. The eyes of a knight who has just discovered that he is not yet strong enough for the job. And against that specific expression, she had never once in 3 lifetimes had any defense at all. When a knight comes at you like that, she thought, refusing isn't really an available option. I don't mind sparring right now, she said. Will you be all right in your condition? Yes. And please don't go easy on me simply because I happen to be a patient this week. Because I certainly will not be going easy on you. Eamon started laughing out loud at that. Steel met steel in the golden light, and for once nobody in that yard was sneering at her. Meanwhile, down at the front gate, a traveler stamped the road dust off his boots and looked up. I almost had to sleep outdoors, he said, staring up at the tower with both hands on his hips. Now then, shall I go and pay my respects to Lady Erin after all this time apart? He had come to take her sword hand off in an accident. Erin Reithers, whose hand breaks first?